Well, hello, my friends. Welcome back to Embrace the Question. It's Bible study with me, and we're starting a new book. This is going to be the book of Exodus. I know you were wondering, as was I, which direction we were going to go. It's hard not to touch Exodus after you've come out of Genesis. Getting through Genesis was quite a ride, and it left a mark on me. It was amazing to just take in the whole story again. And I'm always a little bit, there's an emotional attachment to the story itself. I get the same whenever I go into the story of David. David, I start, when he is selected, when he's anointed, he's been watching sheep, and then you go through all of his exploits, his running from Saul, his move to the throne in Jerusalem, and all the troubles he has with his kids, and then his death, and you just want to break down crying because it's so loaded with reality. You just attach yourself to it. I find Genesis very much the same, but Exodus, the natural progression, the story continues. It's just, we need to do Exodus. And then we'll talk about, I really doubt we'll go into Leviticus after that because that's just a totally different thing altogether. But let's take a look at Exodus because there's so much groundwork in Exodus that needs to be covered before you can understand the Gospels, okay? So let's look at Exodus next. Before we do, guess what I'm going to do? Yeah. You need to get you some Solway coffee. I'm telling you, I finished a cup just now. I feel a lot better. And by the way, please visit the Buy Me a Coffee blog. You don't have to buy me a coffee, but get on there and look at the articles because there's teachings on there that I really don't necessarily want to put on YouTube for different reasons, but these are especially potent as articles. Okay, let's just leave it that way. And there will be other things. There's freebies on the blog that you can download, ebooks, that type of thing. So check that out. Get you some Solway coffee, solwaycoffee.com, SOLWAY coffee.com. Let's take a look at Exodus chapter 1. All right, if you're just joining us for the first time, I invite you to like and subscribe. Hit the little bell because if you don't hit the bell, I will be releasing chapter after chapter, and likely it will not be hitting your Facebook feed unless you hit the bell. And I really hope you'll go through this study with us. We had quite a crew that went through the entirety of Genesis. Hopefully they will all be with us again here in Exodus. But as always, we're using the English Standard Version. And let's just start with verse 1. These are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob, each with his household: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher. All the descendants of Jacob were 70 persons. Joseph was already in Egypt. This kind of got my attention because we have Jacob moving to Egypt, right? It says Joseph's already there, so 11 sons move in. 11. If I have not Googled 11 to see what the biblical significance of the number 11 is. But I would propose to you that 11 is the number of transition. Because what are we doing? We are moving not only from Canaan to Egypt, but we are about to move into a period of trying, of slavery, a 430-year period, that 40 being very significant, for a time of testing. 11. What happened at the end of Jesus' ministry, at the crucifixion? He lost one. He lost Judas. They went to 11 disciples. They couldn't stay at 11. They had to draw lots to fill Judas's seat. But it's interesting that 11 was a transition from a time of Jesus' ministry to Israel only, and it's about to break out to the whole of the world as they knew it, which is the inclusion of the Gentiles, a time of transition. All right, so 11 is significant here. It says that the descendants of Jacob were about 70 persons. Okay, think men. That's what's being counted. Abraham's household of fighting men were 318. That's a refresher from the earlier half of Genesis when we talked about Abraham. And Abraham was a powerful man. But when you talk about 70 sons and their families, most of the commentators believe that Jacob moved between 2,000 and 3,000 people to Egypt to settle in the land of Goshen. Okay, so this is not a small group. And you might get a feel of that if we go back a couple of chapters and look at the wagon train that Pharaoh sent to help Jacob move into Egypt. That's a lot of people. If you study the dynamics of the population and what the possibilities are with the population growth over a period of time, most of what I read suggest that the population would double every 25 years. So you went, if he say had 2,500 people move into Egypt, 25 years later, they are now at 5,000. 50 years later, they're at 10,000. Where are they going to be in 400 years? Well, that's going to be quite a few, right? But you have to factor in the hardships, the fact that Pharaoh is eventually going to declare war on the babies, the male babies of Israel. So all of that becomes a factor, but you're talking about a lot of people. Okay, let's go on. Verse 6. Then Joseph died, and all his brothers, and all that generation. And just the blatantness, the bluntness of that verse, because this is truly the end of the beginning. As much as you loved Joseph, again, he was kind of like David to me, right? You follow him from really his birth, because he was the favored son. He was the son of Rachel, Jacob's favorite, the one that he loved. Him and Benjamin were the only two sons, and you follow him through all the treachery that's done on his life. He's moved to Egypt. He becomes our messianic figure, if you will, because he's providing salvation to not just the Jews, but also the Egyptians. He's quite a character. And then here in verse 6, he's dead. He's gone. No matter how great you are, this is how it ends, right? And all his brothers and all that generation. That is just a summary that's very sobering. Verse 7. But the people of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so that the land was filled with them. And I want you to notice the intentionality of the writer here, mostly believed to be Moses. And we think this could not be a more powerful statement. They grew to be exceedingly strong. He's not mincing words here. The land is filled with them. So the Lord is blessing them. They are literally fulfilling the command of God to Adam. Be fruitful and multiply. Got to get my mind working. I need more coffee. All right. Verse 8. But now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply. And if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land. Okay, so there's always, no matter how good the leadership can be, it seems like we're always just a generation or two away from leadership that is polar opposite. Polar opposite. I believe we are experiencing that right now in this nation and abroad completely. And he says, let us deal shrewdly with them. The word shrewdly there is a word for wisely. Your translation may say wise. Let's just be wise about this, guys. We need to be wise. And what he's really saying is we need to be harsh with these people. We need to prevent them. We need to do some population control. Ever think about that? Ever heard that before? Seems like that always comes up whenever too much of a good thing is happening. We need to start trying to control it. We need to put the kibosh on all of these people. They're too prosperous. They might join our enemies and fight against us. They might. These are chances that are really contrived because one guy is insecure, okay? And we're doing it in the name of wisdom. All right, so yes, this sounds familiar to me. Verse 11, yes. Therefore they set taskmasters over them to afflict them with heavy burdens. They built for Pharaoh store cities, Pithom and Ramesses. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied, and the more they spread abroad. And the Egyptians were in dread of the people of Israel. Why? Why were they in dread? I'll tell you why they were in dread. Not because the Hebrews were threatening, but because the newscasters in Egypt were constantly sending the message out to the Egyptians, these people are a threat. So they ruthlessly made the people of Israel work as slaves, verse 14, and made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar and brick, and in all kinds of work in the field. In all their work, they ruthlessly made them work as slaves. So you'll notice mortar and brick, verse 14. That's what I have down here in the bottom of the screen. Labanao, a brick. Means a brick. Sometimes it's used for the word tile, but it's synonymous with slavery. We first saw this term in the building of Babylon. Genesis 10-ish, right in there, where they were molding bricks and building a tower, and they were using slavery to do it. But it's the uniformity of the brick that makes slaves out of a culture. They want the powers that be, the pharaohs of the world that are insecure over the prosperity of God's people, want to make everybody the same. It's the uniformity of the brick that speaks of slavery. Okay? That's what the picture is here in Exodus 1. All right. So let's continue. Their lives are made bitter. Verse 15. Then the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah, when you serve as midwife to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a son, you shall kill him. But if it is a daughter, she shall live. But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them. but let the male children live. So the king of Egypt called the midwives and said to them, why have you done this? And let the male children live. The midwives said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them. So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew very strong. I want to stop right there, because these midwives were midwives not only to the Egyptians, they were also the midwives to the Hebrews. They were probably Hebrew midwives, honestly. Shiphrah and Puah, I don't know the origin of those names, but I've always pictured them as being Hebrews. But as servants, they were also forced to be midwife to the Egyptians. Either way, regardless of nationality, these women feared God. Again, a shift towards Hebrew here. But they feared God, and God dealt well with them. Okay, so that is of interest to me. Again, population control is the answer that we see in the natural. What's going on in the supernatural? In the supernatural, we can assume that there is a Messiah, a Savior, one who is going to lead people from captivity. There is one to be born here, and the spirit world knows it. And so the principalities of this nation are pulling strings. They are treating Pharaoh like a puppet, and he is doing their bidding by trying to kill the male children that are born. Okay, we see this as a picture of the birth of the Messiah, when Herod is doing the exact same thing. Okay, so that's why knowing Exodus helps us to know what's going on when we get into the Gospels. All right, let's continue. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. All right, that's interesting. Apparently, midwives were not those who were used to having families. I don't know if they were assigned this position because they couldn't, they were barren, but they were unable typically to have families, and yet God gives these families. And Pharaoh commanded all his people, every son that is born to the Hebrews you shall cast into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live. Every son, not just every son of a certain age, every son born. It's a harsh edict, and the Nile was not a place you could survive. If you've seen National Geographic at all, you don't go swimming in the Nile very often. I mean, you have to have guards. It has to be a protected spot in order to even get into the Nile, because the Nile is full of alligators and other creatures that are just dangerous. Crocodiles, not alligators. Sorry, Florida creeping into me here. But this is the setup, and this is the scene that Moses wrote. He wants us to understand the context moving forward. This is looking pretty bleak. And so there we go. We're now in Exodus, and we've gotten through Exodus 1, and it's already starting to connect some dots that we are going to see in the Gospels, and that's pretty cool. It's been the end of the beginning. Now we're on to the next chapter. So next week, we'll do Exodus 2. I have been working on my chosen commentaries. I've gotten a new one recorded. Stand by for that, because it takes time for me to do those even close to justice. But I'm working on it. Been working on it today. You'll notice this shirt. All right. Guys, hope you have a blessed week. We'll talk to you very, very soon. Peace.